Right, then on the other side, because obviously if you notice the way we've set up this episode, we've basically tried to talk around what are the most impossible problems at the moment. Now, you led into it. Even though at the moment, conceptually, yeah, it does feel impossible to actually get people to pay money for the product. The problem is, it's the most obvious initial solution to this issue, right? Because we know the people have the money. They're literally the most fucking sought-after demographic in the entire world. As I alluded to, they already fucking spend the money. They'll spend it on any other shite because of how marketing works. It's just for some reason at the moment, they won't specifically pay, in this case, for Counter-Strike. Now, there's a million aspects to this that I don't really know. I want to see where we want to go with this, because on the one hand, on some level, I do still think it would be possible to make a pay-per-view tournament. It's just part of the problem is this. You can only sort of do it if you're already one of the power players. You have to basically beat ESL or Blast, because first of all, if you don't have the top teams, no one's paying. If they're not paying for free Counter-Strike now, no one's fucking paying for basically like the field we had in Flashpoint 1. No one's going to pay us for that, no matter how good. I could make production value 10 times better than Blast. No one's paying for that if they won't pay for ESL Clone, for example, right? But the other angle on it is this, which is when I think about the pay-per-view angle, I don't really know at the moment what the hook would be still. Because as far as I can tell, the only way I could do it tomorrow is I'd have to probably be like ESL, and I'd almost have to say, I'm just going to take away most of the big tournaments from you. You've got to pay me to get them back. Like if you want Cologne, you've got to pay for that. Or if you want Katowice, what else can you do at the moment? How do you bridge the gap, do you think?
Well, so, I mean, I'll just quickly comment on that before I go to the other stuff. But I think the way you would have to do it is you would move just one of those tournaments behind a paywall as like a test run. And you'd make sure that it has the biggest prize pool of all of them, even 3 bigger than majors, ideally. And then, you run the risk and you find out whether people are actually willing to pay or not. I do agree. It's weird how people are sort of just proud sometimes that they're not playing. I mean, with the number of hours that I watch Counter-Strike, I would gladly pay for it, but if you're giving it to me for free, then why would I? And I guess the one point that I would just quickly point to that I've made previously, but I didn't sort of hit on is, right now on my screen, there's a DHL ad during the broadcast, the Gambit Face game is on. If you think that Twitch can't target perfectly to all the users watching from different countries, which is they can perfectly, but they still can. It just won't be perfect for a number of reasons. The static logos that are part of the broadcast, they're not targeted at all. You see it there.
Yes.
Somebody watching in Australia sees the logo. Somebody watching it elsewhere sees the logo. And you could still have global companies that are present in all those countries or most of those countries, and it's valuable for them, but it's not targeted the same way, which means you're never getting the maximum value for what is actually in some ways the most valuable spot. Okay, so in terms of the other ways of bridging the gap, ideally, I think what you would do is you would start offering a better product and you try to find ways to charge for that. Now, what might...
Isn't that in some ways, though, like a catch-22? Because the problem here, Lopez, is they already compete against each other by trying to offer a better product. And so in doing so, I feel like they've painted themselves in a corner. Because here's the joke, right? The best actual way to do it, I've realised, is this. Imagine if you went back to before 2020 and Blast was the pay-per-view, but then they came with this increased production. Now there'd be something I felt like I'm getting for the money. The problem I feel like right now, I know it might sound like a temporary concern, but I feel like if tomorrow you made any of these tournaments pay-per-view, you'd have to add extra shit you don't have, because you shouldn't, by the way, because as we're talking about, it's like the NFL. I'll pay to watch the NFL game, but the problem is at the moment a fan would be but I already get it for free. You know what I mean? There'd be that mentality to overcome, wouldn't there?
So what I was going to say is by better product, I don't mean marginally better production value, better HUD, better that. I actually think you need customization to some extent. Right. So I think it would have to be first of all, I still don't know why I don't know why I can't have the snipe functionality on Twitch. Why do I care what the way the games are observed is for the person who kind of knows the game and needs to follow, and crucially, so that the commentator can stay on top of the game, because they're not the same person. Unlike 8 years ago when you and I did these events, you were still the person kind of clicking around. Yeah. So you could be a little more aggressive with the changing. Yeah. So first of all, I would pay money to be able to click around myself. And I used to pay for Snipe because I just think it's a much, much better viewer experience that I can click around myself and see what I actually want to watch. I think that's one thing. I think fewer other people would pay for that than you might think, as we saw with Snipe, though I think there's other reasons for that too. I think the other piece is, I think it's very clear based on comments that the stated preference is that people would pay to have different casters. Now, I don't know if that happens in practice. People say things revealed versus stated preferences. I think if you structured the schedules so that you were playing 12 hours a day and people could do multiple games, I do think you could justify having a couple different sets of casters for games, for example. So
that's a good angle.
So let's just say you could choose now as a viewer, you're a huge Anders fan. Now, you can have whoever's casting this game. We're talking, so I have it muted. I have no idea who's casting the game. But you could have them, or you could have Anders and Semler. Or, you could have fans vote and say, who do you actually want this? And maybe you bring back Henry to do it. Maybe Chad's doing it. Maybe Semler's doing it. Maybe it's a new combination that hasn't been used before, as long as it's one play-by-play-ish guy, one color guy. These kinds of things. I honestly have not thought about this.
That's not a bad angle, because that's almost like a Patreon tier type approach where you do get a perk for the money, so you feel like you have some input in it. Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
So, I think things of that nature that actually make it better. Now, here's the way I would actually do it if I really needed to make this thing profitable. And I think that would lead to the most money, but it would make people very unhappy in the short term, is I would put a 5-minute delay on the broadcast, and you can get the live broadcast for a nice monthly subscription.
Right. By the way, I don't even hate that, because if people don't know, the original models of pay-per-view that worked, or in some sense worked, were mainly the Korean StarCraft / early League of Legends related ones, where they had a pay-per-view, like GSL used to have to pay for, except unless you wanted super terrible quality, you had to basically pay. Then also, I know OGN Champions in League of Legends, again, you could either watch it free at okay quality, or you could get the VODs and watch high quality. Because I've just hit on another massive downside. We've also been giving every motherfucker the VODs for free for 10 years now as well. It's this is one of those areas where, here's the difference, right? I have a lot of sympathy for team orgs, because some of the people who came in and inflated and fucked their market economically were just people who were millionaires just playing around doing whatever they wanted. The people who are the TOs, I have very little fucking sympathy, because you all did all this to yourself. You made a product that is actually awesome. By the way, I agree with what Erpa said. I would, even though I might dislike some of the things about ESL, I would pay myself to watch ESL Cologne, of course. It's a fucking sick tournament.
Obviously.
Yeah, I've got I love Counter-Strike, so of course I would pay either a specific. By the way, I would not only pay a monthly fee, I would pay a specific one-off fee for that tournament. But if I myself am in a position where it's like that, you have been giving me everything for free for so long, it would feel weird still, Yeah,
look, let's say in the entire ESL circuit, everything ESL, everything DreamHack, because they're part of the same company now, everything ESL 1, IEM, all of those tournaments for Counter-Strike, you had to pay $2 a month. It might vary by country. Some people won't have easy access to credit cards, so you have to kind of solve around it. But you have to pay $2 a month to get something better. I have to imagine a very substantial number of people would subscribe. Now, let's just say that for $10 a month, or maybe it's 5 to 2 depending on country, and then it's between 10 and 20 depending on country, you get the 0 delay one, and let's just say there's no ad breaks, and during those ad breaks instead, there's some kind of
shoulder content or something.
Separate desk thing. It's Yanko and Chad and you and whomever just chatting during the breaks, and you get that instead of going to commercials. There's things. The problem is, like you said, the Counter-Strike product is actually fantastic. It's really great for viewers. It's great for viewers. I love watching it. The problem really is in some ways that we created this amazing product, and we just gave it away for free.
We spoiled everyone.
And then all of a sudden, money just never appeared from anywhere. And now our question is okay, we have this great product, but everybody's always gotten it for free. So how do we rein it back?
Let me ask you a cynical question, because here's another angle I've thought of. Well, another thing that always holds back the esports industry is none of us will, I'm saying us in the general sense here, obviously the collective, none of us will ever do anything short term that limits us a little bit to make the greater scene grow for everyone, because in part, the people that we hate, our competitors, would also benefit. So fuck everyone. Everyone always does the prisoner's dilemma approach, right? So here's one problem I think already. The most eligible person to do this, as we've just said, based on their control over the scene, is obviously actually ESL, because they're they're the only ones who basically, they almost can't die in a year or two, even if they actually had big problems with this. And I actually also think, like we were talking about, with events like Katowice and Cologne, they're probably the only people who could like brute force like a certain amount of fans to at least start buying the product. The problem is this, right? When I think cynically about what could fuck that up, I think of this. If I'm someone at ESL, I'm sure they're also doing this equation, Tommy, which goes like this. But if we do that and we potentially lose any viewership and early on it looks like it's going bad, isn't that a hit to us and a benefit to, say, Blast if they don't have the pay-per-view? Instead, wouldn't it be better for us to just hold position? This sounds familiar from Flashpoint. Let's just hold position for as long as we can, hope everyone else just leaves, and then we have a bigger pie to have our share from. Because obviously that's going to be the cynical thing, right? They're going to say, why don't I just wait and hope Blast burn themselves out with this money, Flashpoint goes away, and then in maybe 2 years, Tommy, maybe I have the whole space, and then I do my pay-per-view. Wouldn't that be a problem? Is that not a concern?
Well, I mean, look, it's like, that's how we started the discussion, right? It's like the different incentives. It's not, it would be very different if you have control of the whole ecosystem and you could just decide what to do and how to solve for it. You just have a lot more tools at your disposal. I think it's, I think with the way...
How would you weigh that gamble up, though? Like, if you were really in that position, so you're asking yourself, like, either I succeed now, and obviously if you succeed, by the way, the upside could be enormous. You could have, like, a massive revenue column that no one else has. But the downside is you might potentially, like, risk some of your market share or something. How would you personally weigh that up if you were an ESL guy, do you think?
Well, I mean, so one, like, this is just noting that this is based on, like, my understanding of their business and what's out in the public, etc. Like, specifically what's out in the public and what's, like, not like stuff that I might have heard in private. That's not to be mentioned, right. but like, you know, like I would at least try new things. So do I think that their business just like completely tanks if they try hosting Cologne or Katowice once as like a separate structure with like some of this stuff? No. Like, is there like some blowback? Of course. Like, the problem is like every single time there is any change whatsoever, there's blowback. So like, to some extent, if you're not happy with status quo, like you just have to embrace it. You just have to accept it. People are not gonna like everything you do. Like, I'm sorry, that's just the reality of life. And that includes like people, you know, your customers. It probably includes your investors too. But they're not gonna like everything. Hopefully, they like the big picture and you get to the right place. But like, I think you have to be willing to experiment a little bit more. And like, look, these are things that we came up with based on the 5-minute conversation without like planning for it, without thinking about it much in advance. I'm sure there's other ideas, and like there's ideas that I have in my back pocket that I don't want to talk about because maybe there's a chance that I in the future have a chance to, you know, use some of them. But like, there are other ideas. There's a bunch of people in the industry who have other ideas as well and who have had the same ideas. There's no question about it. It's only a question of like, why are they not being implemented to any extent? And I think there would be benefits to at least like trying a little bit more different things than is happening today. You don't have to commit to something completely different. I mean, even the Facebook deal at the time, I think like that was trying something different. But it seems like since then, I don't really know that much has changed off the top of my head. I don't know if you feel differently, but to me it feels like that was the sort of the last like bigger swing, if you will.
I mean, one thing I will say that is actually a massive hill to climb there, because as you pointed out, where basically the contrast has to go like this. It can't just be Facebook or Twitch, because we know those are unfortunately with night and day. Like, obviously the experience on Facebook was pretty bad and it had loads of flaws. It never delivered on what it promised and blah, blah. Like, listen, that's the easiest one of all time to destroy. Of course, everyone thought the actual product itself wasn't good, right? Still to this day, a lot of morons don't realise, me, you, Richard Lewis, we were never arguing that Facebook was going to be awesome. We were arguing that the precedent was important, hence this episode now, for example. But the more obvious one's obviously YouTube, right? Because YouTube already had a fantastic fucking service. Like, I even said it back then. I noticed, by the way, dude, it's only the last few years people are starting to come back around to my POV, which is, I know, just like you, I always thought YouTube was better because it had all the rewind.
Rewind alone makes it better.
Remember, I don't give a fuck about typing in Twitch chat, so I don't care about that. Like, I'm just doing it for all these. So to me, it was always also, you know, like instantly a VOD appears when it's over. As you say with the rewind, you know, it doesn't matter if you're late. It's like, there was a million aspects that were better. But here's the problem. People made the same comments they did about Facebook, about YouTube when ECS went to that. And dude, these comments were literally divorced from reality. People were saying stuff like, this player is like, the tech is bad, or it's all laggy for me. It's like, this can't be true, mate. YouTube is better than Twitch. I even used to say this to people. At the time that was going on, I lived in Korea, where, by the way, Twitch was terrible from Europe compared to other services. I would go to esports events in different countries to attend CS events, and what I would find was Twitch was hit and miss depending on what country I'm in, what the connection's like. YouTube was consistent everywhere in the whole world, as you'd imagine, because it's a massive platform outside of just fucking esports. So my problem is this. I know from Flashpoint, if you present yourself as an alternative and you have even a minor tech hiccup, people are going to roast you alive and be like, you're fucking idiots, you don't succeed. So I can only imagine if people already complain, like, dude, I saw people complain about ESL's like virtual studio they were just running in, like, they're in a fucking online thing and they still had like all these people. Like, if you're going to complain about that for free, people are going to be really harsh about this product if it's pay-per-view. Like, it better be perfect tech. Like, you cannot launch with like and the reason I'm bringing this up, by the way, is from talking to, funny enough, some of the people behind Sniper when me and you were working then, obviously I still have stock in the company, right? I'll say straight up, I remember the early days of online streaming for stuff like the NBA. It was hit and miss for that as well. Like, you might pay for the NBA pass that when it first came out and get unlucky. Your shit might just be streaming laggy. It's amazing now, but yeah.
The NHL pass was the worst. Like, that was, I think that might have come out first. It feels like, at least I used that first, and like that was a huge hit or miss for like, I felt like a long time.
Yes.
Just laggy, just like wouldn't get good connection from Europe at least.
Yep.
It just wasn't a good product, and that was like, that wasn't like an expensive product, wasn't it like cheap either. It's like $200 a season or something.
Yep. And so the difference is, like, some of those fans hadn't been in the world we had where they had the flawless product given them to free. So there was teething problems. People sort of like, they waited and they got past them. And I'll also say this, I noticed those leagues were smart enough in the sports leagues to not push it too heavily till they had the tech sorted, actually. They didn't sort of like make it obnoxious the first season. Because as you're pointing out, everyone would have signed up and gone, what the fuck is this? Like, I had cable a minute ago. Why am I watching this shit on my computer all laggy and stuff? The problem is in esports, like, again, I feel like we do have sort of like spoiled kids, basically. We have, most of the esports fans are like the 12-year-old girl who's like, I wanted the purple pony for my birthday. It's like, still a fucking pony, like the purple one. So I do feel as though that alone would be a massive hill to climb that wouldn't exist for other features of media. Like, I feel like if you don't nail the tech, it's going to be the shortest experiment ever, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be hard. It wouldn't be easy. And I think there's always going to be people who are going to be annoyed and upset and mad about it. But I just think you have to try something. I don't know that that's the idea. I think that's one of the things that I would probably try. I think I would be more inclined to do things that are subscription based than I would to do like PPV based things. Just on the margin, I think. But I think it would be a valuable experiment to see what would happen if you did a PPV event where you invited the 8 best teams in the world and you played like some elaborate, really interesting format.
Yes.
That was exciting for fans, all in like a good environment, really good production. I would just be interested. Like, it would just be an interesting experiment. I don't know how many people would pay, and I think you'd have to vary pricing by region. But I would be interested to find out, because I suspect there are more people who would pay than you might think.
Oh, that's the other thing I was going to say. I also don't think, because here's another problem we're going to have here, is for a moment to have this discussion, we have to come out of the world where people think that the 100 comments on Reddit represent all the people who watch and consume Counter-Strike. And by the way, spoiler, they can lie on the internet. Like, if anyone hasn't noticed, there's tons of people who pretend they don't watch my content, but bizarrely have like negative comments to say about 400 episodes. Like, you must be watching, motherfucker. So we know you are. You just, your doth protest too much. You pretend you don't. So even though everyone says, and like I said, it's almost like a swag thing of like, oh, I wouldn't pay for that, you bloody loser. Like, in the same sense, right? I do feel though, as though more people would pay than even these companies probably realize. But the problem is you've got to have the balls to go for it. So here's my problem, right? In the short term, I agree. The least amount of risk is actually BESL, take one of your big events, only do it for one, build into it with the whole campaign about this one's going to have to pay for blah, blah, blah. you test if it works, and if it goes really well, obviously then you can roll it out further, right? The problem is this. I actually think, and me and Richard were talking about this on By the Numbers, I actually think the more likely player to succeed, though, is like what you said earlier about the Netflix angle. It's actually if you're ESL and instead I have a pass that I pay every month, and that gets me all the ESL tournaments. Like, I actually feel like that would be a more successful. Because you can force me to pay for Cologne, but there's idiots might just not do it on, but like, the difference is, the pass basically tells me, am I a real fan of Counter-Strike? If I am, I'm going to have to pay for it. Like, as I said, I myself would literally pay with my own hard-earned money the fucking ESL pack, because they do cover most of the tournaments in the world that I want to watch. It doesn't matter what I think about Carmack, does it? Like, if I want to watch the fucking match, I'd have to pay. So I feel as though actually people would be better served gambling and just going for broke with the circuit and putting the whole circuit on there effectively. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.